Do you know the meaning of the word pathfinding? According to reliable sources, pathfinding is the plotting of the shortest route between 2 points. Kind of like solving a maze, but there are no dead ends and every single trajectory is possible. If you think about it, pathfinding is present in many aspects of our lives. When you travel, usually all you do is go from a starting point to an end point on the shortest trajectory possible, unless you just want to waste fuel for some reason, which is totally okay as well. Another example is that when you solve a math equation, you're mentally pathfinding your way into a smaller and simpler one. Throughout the history, there have been loads of pathfinders. The Portuguese sailors who found the sea route to India, famous scientists who found formulas that we unconsciously use to this day, and so on. And to no surprise, the concept of pathfinding also applies to game speedruns. To obtain the fastest time possible in a speedrun, the player must calculate, find, and execute the shortest and most time-efficient trajectory, which is most of the time hidden in plain sight. And to this extent, Trackmania is no exception. In this video, we'll go through the story of how through sheer pathfinding, players completely broke one of the campaign tracks, I-9. I-9 was one of the official campaign tracks on Trackmania Esports World Cup, which is an older version of the game we now know, released in 2006. The campaign consisted of 10 packs of 9 tracks each, ranging from the letter A to the letter I, and as you progress through each letter, the tracks become more and more difficult. Well, I-9 was the last track in the campaign. If you find yourself playing the game for the first time, this might not be the best map for you to start on, as unlike the first easy and friendly maps, the intended route on this one is quite ambiguous and unclear, and you may even feel lost or confused while playing it. The track starts off with a pretty simple left-right, followed by a drift to the left and immediately after another drift to the right. You then have to drive a big jump in which usually you have to let go of your acceleration, because otherwise you crash into the After the checkpoint you have 2 road entrances and both of them work even though the left one is faster. You then drive a long turn to the left and do a really hard and precise jump through this hole, a wall ride with the most sketchy exit you could ever imagine, followed by 2 really tight consecutive turns, and finally a tricky jump to finish. This track was released in January 2006, and not too long after players started noticing something. There was a serious lack of checkpoints. If we take a closer look, we can see that there are only 4 checkpoints, and they are all placed in the same half of the map. And that, if you think about it, makes the other half of the map pretty much irrelevant. If there was a way to complete the track by only driving half of it, the world record would be improved by a lot. But how would such a feat be achieved? You know, in Trackmania, all you have to do to finish a track is collect all the checkpoints, no matter the route you take. On I-9, the tricky checkpoints you have to collect are all right next to each other. Which means if you could collect this checkpoint and then that checkpoint and then that checkpoint really quickly, all you would have to do next is drive the normal way of the map until the last checkpoint, brake really hard and drop down into the finish. It looked and sounded like a pretty hard thing to do, but after some collective brainstorming, players found a way to do it. Instead of driving the normal way, you would turn around at the start, drive on the grass for a bit, enter this piece of road and grab the first checkpoint. Jump on the wall-wide exit for a smooth landing, and at the same time you collect the second checkpoint, execute a really tricky technique called overwall. Before the second checkpoint, you tap brake for a fraction of a second and start turning left. As soon as your car crashes into the wall and starts climbing, you press right for another fraction of a second and immediately start turning left again. And you have successfully climbed the wall that leads to the third checkpoint, all in 29 seconds. With a lot of time to spare, you then drive to the last checkpoint and drop down to finish. 42.15 seconds, a really solid time that beats the average normal way by about 20 seconds or something. But players were not yet satisfied with this run. There was a way of improving the world record even further. It is a known fact in Trackmania that driving on road is almost always faster than driving on any other type of surface. In the recently discovered route, you spend a tedious 11 seconds driving on grass, which of course is not optimal, and because of that, a new way of driving the track arose. By using a wider turnaround, you can get more speed and climb this wall, which allows you to drive on road instead of grass. By doing that, you enter the first checkpoint section with a half a second lead, and that lead will only snowball as the road progresses due to the speed you collected previously. You can then drive the rest of the map using the same way the previous route did. Using this way, the player Human managed to improve the world record by 0.75 seconds. But we're not done yet. Human missed one tiny detail. At the end section, there was an obvious shortcut that no one had noticed, one that could be a huge time saver. An overwall to the left and you could easily jump into the finish and beat the world record by at least 2 seconds. This was done pretty quickly by the player K-Back, and over the years players improved this time by more than 2 seconds. The world record that stands today is a whopping 38.19 by Crosshairs, who managed to get an almost instant overwall directly to the finish. But these shortcut routes weren't really taken lightheartedly by the community. After the first shortcut route was discovered, a lot of people were angry and complained that the track had been ruined. So Nadeo, the company who created the game, updated the map to fix the shortcuts. On the 21st March 2006, the track I-9A was released. I-9A was basically I-9 with 4 added checkpoints that would force you to drive both halves of the map. Kind of like that one bootleg product that claims to be better than the original but ends up breaking apart after 3 days. For the first couple of months, it looked like Nadeo actually managed to cut-proof this map. People were happy as their favorite campaign map's shortcut scars were finally healing. And for the first time in a while, the world record battles were disputed using the intended route of the map. The only trick that was discovered after a while was to intentionally hit the top of this hole with the roof of your car, to reduce your airtime and get an earlier landing. But other than that, the track seemed rather shortcut-proof. But they didn't really anticipate that Trackmania players have a collective IQ of infinite. Squared. While closely examining the map, players noticed that this specific segment was really inefficient. 2 consecutive sharp turns means you have to slow down your car by a significant amount. Oh man, if only there was a way of skipping this segment. I'm just kidding, of course there was. In March 2016, the player Diablo uploaded this magnificent run, where instead of slowing down his car to drive the inefficient part, he went full speed into the wall, pulled an outstanding 360 and skipped both turns, while also maintaining more speed. A new world record was set by a margin of 2.96 seconds. For a long time, this was the only shortcut that was known to exist, and players were having a blast improving it over and over again to its fullest potential. And the world record was lowered to an astonishing 1 minute and 0.68 seconds by the player Elite Royal. But around 1 year later, some creative pathfinders started a new journey. I like to call it the I-9A's shortcut dissection operation. There was one major flaw on I-9A that really couldn't go unpunished. You see, all Nadeo did to fix I-9 shortcuts was add 4 extra checkpoints on one half of the map. Other than that, the map remained rather untouched. Which means Nadeo left the biggest threat to I-9A's integrity intact. These 3 checkpoints. They were still all right next to each other. But this time, you couldn't collect the 3 checkpoints the same way. One reason is because by turning around at the start, you would miss the first few checkpoints. And the other reason is even if you would turn around, you couldn't jump in the wall right exit, because now there was a checkpoint that would force you to jump the correct way. Then how can we collect these 3 checkpoints as fast as possible? There is a famous trick in Trackmania called bug slide. A bug slide is when you jump at a 90-degree angle and start drifting before or as soon as you land. The result is a really abrupt and fast turn, which happens because of some programming miscalculations. Usually, you want to do this trick on grass or on dirt, as the trick is especially useful on those 2 types of surfaces. But as we have seen from the past examples, on I-9, breaking rules usually brings you to success. And that's exactly what happened. In 2017, the player The Insane got a run that surprised nearly everybody. He drove the first segment of the map normally, but when he reached the jump, he angled his car to the left. Notice how the front wheels are lower than the back wheels. This is a key element for what we're about to witness. Because the front wheels hit the road first, performing a bug slide will make them go up at the same time your car abruptly turns to the left. As a result, The Insane was able to bounce with the lower part of the car in the road border straight into the furthest road. He then climbed the wall to the mid-checkpoint road, cleanly drove by the zigzag turns, and then jumped to the left for a really tricky landing on the boosters. He then slowed his car down, grabbed the last checkpoint and drove to finish. That was it. It was a clear victory for the Pathfinders. Well, not really. In 2007, with the release of Trackmania United, Rax, an admin from the site Trackmania Exchange, which is a site where players can upload their own tracks, decided to remake or update every single track from the ESWC campaign, adding some decoration blocks and also preventing some obvious shortcuts. And I-9 was one of the victims. This is TMN Race I-9, or as I like to call it, I-9A on steroids. The track got a huge quality of life update, with some added decorations, a smoother ending, and a bunch of checkpoints that now prevented you from shortcutting the map. Or so he thought. The first shortcut on the newly updated version was discovered by Nino, and it was a pretty simple one. Instead of driving the loop in the end, you would leave early, hit the top of the looping block and get pushed down into the finish line. But this shortcut could only save about 1 second at most, and because it wasn't the end of the track, you would have to get a run that was at least similar to world record pace before executing it, which made the shortcut extremely unreliable. But the player RaceHands doesn't have the term unreliable on his dictionary. And in 2016, with an almost flawless run and a near perfect shortcut, RaceHands would set an impressive record that everyone thought would remain unbeatable. And it did, for 4 years straight until 2020. 2020 was a difficult year, because for the ones who may not know, a dangerous virus struck the entire planet Earth and forced people to stay home for long periods of time, or something like that. But this also meant that avid Trackmania fans had much more time to put their minds into theory crafting. And in early 2020, the players Schmanuel and LinkMax were able to punish one big flaw on TMN Race I-9. Apparently, while messing around with the checkpoints, Rax had made an incredible mistake. He removed this checkpoint. And while it may not seem like a big deal, it absolutely was. "1 minute and 2 seconds. An unbeatable world record was finally teared apart by two brave soldiers. These two records sparked a huge hype around TMN Race I-9, and other players started searching for new routes. But quickly, a devastating realization struck the hopeful Pathfinders. Rax had changed something else on the map, and he was either way ahead of his time or just accidentally did it. But this change would twist the I-9 shortcut history forever. In this segment of the map, Rax had moved the checkpoint 2 blocks further. Doesn't look like much, but because the checkpoint was placed on a downhill, moving it further also means moving it down. And this meant the 3 key checkpoints for any I-9 shortcut were no longer right next to each other. Devastating. There's no way to shortcut I-9 further if collecting these 3 checkpoints in a row is impossible. Or is it? According to all known laws of aviation, there's no way that a car should be able to fly. Its wheels are too small to lift its fat little body off the ground. The car, of course, flies anyway, because cars don't care what humans think is impossible. This is a Uber bug. A Uber bug happens when a cluster of miscalculations meets another cluster of miscalculations. If you bug slide into a road border with your front wheels angled in a very specific way, there is a chance you can get a Uber bug, which is when the game gets absolutely drunk out of its mind and decides to send your car flying into oblivion. And believe it or not, throughout the years, players actually found ways to trigger this bug quite consistently. Now hear me out. Remember when I said that on I-9 you had to release in order not to hit the checkpoint? Well, with the checkpoint moved further away, you don't anymore. And this means that with more speed, you can jump way further as well. Meet Unimorph. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to like and subscribe. It helps the channel a whole lot and motivates me to keep doing videos like this one. Thank you for watching and see you on the next one.